Well, hello and welcome back, or maybe welcome for the first time. Thank you for joining us as we continue our look at the Psalms, those songs and poems that we find in one of the books right near the middle of our Bibles. Now, last week, Rachel introduced our Psalms as mystery Psalms because we didn't know which one was going to come this week. So I thought I would give you some clues about which psalm we're going to look at today. Psalm XCV. Psalm 95. Psalm 95. Well done if you said Psalm 95. Well done if you managed to work out that today we're going to be looking at Psalm 95. And to help us start thinking about that, we're going to see if we can come up with some of the ways that we show people how much they mean to us. I'm going to show you some really pixelated, blurry pictures, and you need to try and guess what's happening in each one. And remember, they're all things that we do to show other people how much they mean to us. Here we go. How did you get on? I'm sure you got some of them, if not all of them. Well done if you got any. Now, I'm not sure that we know who wrote this psalm, but we do know that it would have been used as a call to worship in the temple. When we worship someone, we show them how amazing and awesome we think they are. In some ways, it's a bit like showing them how much they mean to us, which is why we had that little quiz. And although we can use the word worship to talk about how we feel about other people, worship is more usually used to talk about ways of showing God how we feel about Him. Now, this psalm would have been read out by the priests or Levites who spent time in the temple teaching people about God. And it tells us some of the ways we can worship God. And it also tells us something about God, so we understand why He deserves our worship. I'm going to read Psalm 95 now. And as I read through it, I want you to listen out for a couple of things. Firstly, listen out for what it tells us about God. And secondly, listen out for what it tells us about some of the ways we can worship God. When we hear bits about how we can worship God, we'll point to ourselves. And I'll give you a clue. Lots of the time, those things are, we get a clue that they're coming because it says, let us. So when you hear the words let us, we know there's one of the ways that we can worship God coming up, and we'll point to ourselves. And when we hear bits that tell us something about God, we'll point up for those. So do join in with that if you'd like to. Psalm 95. Come, let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. Let us come before him with thanksgiving and extol him with music and song. For the Lord is a great God, the great King above all gods. In his hand are the depths of the earth, and the mountain peaks belong to him. The sea is his, for he made it, and his hands formed the dry land. Come, let us bow down in worship. Let us kneel before the Lord, our Maker. For he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care. Today, if only you would hear his voice. Do not harden your hearts as you did at Meribah, as you did that day at Massah in the wilderness, where your ancestors tested me. They tried me, though they had seen what I did. For 40 years I was angry with that generation. I said, they are a people whose hearts go astray, and they have not known my ways. So I made a promise in my anger. They shall never enter my rest. Let's begin by looking at what this psalm tells us about God. First of all, you might have spotted that it uses a number of different names for God. And in verse 1, we see the name Rock. And when we see God being called this, it's a picture of God's strength and is sometimes used also to speak of the safety and protection God gives us when we believe and trust in him. Then in verse 3, we read the word Lord, which is one of the names the Bible uses for God that shows us how special and holy he is. Holy means set apart or different. And verse 3 also says that he is the great God, the King above all gods. He is the one true God, greater than all other gods, the King over all the other gods. Then in verse 3 and 4, we're reminded that this is the God who created the universe and everything in it. God is in control of everything within this vast universe, the things at the furthest points of it, as well as everything else in between. When the Bible was being written, people who believed in other gods thought that different gods were in charge of different parts of the world. But here it tells us that there's no part of the universe that is outside of the Lord's control. There's no part of the universe that he doesn't care for. But the Lord God is great and powerful enough to be in control of the whole universe, all on his own. So perhaps these verses are included as an example of one of the many ways that the God of the Bible is greater than all the other gods. Then we read in verse 6 that God is our maker. He created us. He made us. And then in verse 7, it tells us that he is our God, and we are the people of his pasture, the flock under his care. And if we're being described as his flock, that suggests that we're like sheep, and God is like our shepherd who cares for us. So there are lots of ways that Psalm 95 shows us what a great God the God of the Bible is. Let's look now at what the Bible tells us about what this God that is greater than all other gods deserves from us. When we respond, it means that we do something because of what we find out or get to know about someone or something else. And when we realise that God is greater than anything or anyone else, our response should be to worship him. In verse 1, we read about 2 ways we can worship God. I wonder if you can spot what they are if I put them back up on the screen. Well done if you found sing for joy and shout aloud. Then in verse 2, there are 2 more things that we can do. See if you can find out what they are. Here we read about extolling God with thanksgiving, music and song. If we extol someone, that means that we praise them. We tell them how brilliant we think they are. This great God deserves our joyful songs and our loud shouts. If we love him, we should be responding by giving him thanks for all he has done for us. We should be playing music to him and singing. Verse 6 shows us another way we can worship God. Here's a picture clue. Sometimes we kneel down in front of people to show them that we recognise how special they are, don't we? And how much respect we have for them. So we see what a great God our God is, greater than all other gods, and we see the different ways that we can respond to God's greatness through our worship of him. Then there's just the final few verses of the psalm to look at. These verses look back at a time before the psalm was written, and I think also that they point forward to a time in the future. You might have noticed that the way the psalm is written changes a bit here. So far, it was as though God's people were talking about him, about how great he is, and what their response to that greatness should be. Now, it sounds as though God is talking to his people. And he's reminding them of a time, hundreds of years before, when his people had been slaves in Egypt and he had rescued them. But instead of worshipping him for the great thing that he had done for them, they complained about God and said they wished he'd left them in Egypt because there was nothing to drink in the desert that he had taken them to. And because of this, God stopped many of his people from entering the land that he had promised he would give them, a land of their own where they would have everything they needed to settle down and live in. And that's what those few verses at the end are talking about, that finish with the words, "I made a promise in my anger. They will never enter my rest." Rest was another meaning for the land that God had promised his people. So this is a warning for God's people, that although God is greater than all other gods, as our maker, he deserves our obedience and we should live in the way he made us to. These last few verses warn that if we rebel against God, and the hard hearts we read about here are a picture of this, and if we turn away from him, the consequences are that we too will not enter his rest. But what does that rest mean for us today? God hasn't promised us a land to live in, but he has promised us a place in heaven when we believe and trust in him. The way the Israelites complained about God is just one of the ways that the friendship between people and God is spoiled by sin. So God sent Jesus into the world to do a very special thing. He came to teach people about God and to die on the cross and rise again so that God can forgive people's sins whenever they ask him to. And when that happens, the friendship between people and God can be put right again. After Jesus rose again, he went back to heaven to be with God, and he's there now, sitting right next to God. Sitting down because his job is done and he can have a rest. And when we believe and trust in Jesus, it means that we can share that rest with Jesus, both now, because we know that in the future we will be with him, and in the future when we finally get to heaven and get to spend forever there. But those that disobey God and turn away from him will not get any of this. So this psalm shows us how great God is, greater than anyone or anything else, greater than all other gods. It also shows us that our response to this great God should be that we worship him. And finally, it warns that those whose hearts are hard, those who reject God, will not get to spend forever with God in heaven. Let's pray together about that now. Dear God, thank you that you are a great God. You are the creator of the universe. You are our maker, and you hold everything you have made in your hands. Help us to think about and begin to understand more about just how great you are, greater even than all other gods. Thank you for the ways this psalm shows us how we can respond to your greatness through our worship. Help us to pray for those who don't yet know you or believe in you, so that one day they too can rest because they know they will be with you forever. Amen.
Well, it's our craft time now, and since we've been thinking about singing for joy to the Lord and shouting aloud to the rock of our salvation, I thought we'd make a microphone today, because we use microphones, don't we, to use our voices louder, either for talking or for singing, so everyone can hear us. So these are some of the things that you're going to need. A toilet roll, something to decorate your toilet roll with. So you could use pens if you haven't got anything else, or if you've got some wrapping paper or tissue paper or coloured paper or something like that. Then some scrap paper that we're going to use to make the top of our microphone. So just something old that you don't need. Some kitchen foil, a piece of paper, some scissors, some glue or sellotape if you don't have glue. And then if you've got anything to decorate your microphone with, either ribbons or sequins or stickers or little shiny things, anything to decorate your microphone with. So to start with, what we're going to do is we are going to cover our toilet roll with our with our paper if we've got it. If you haven't, then you can just draw some nice shapes and decorations on your toilet roll. But I am going to measure and cut the size of paper that I need. So to start with, what I'm going to do is I am going to put the edge of my toilet roll on the edge of the paper here, and then I'm going to just put a little mark at the top here so I know which size to cut this. And then I'm going to roll my toilet roll up in my paper like that, and when it gets to where it's overlapping, I'm going to take it round a little bit more, and then I'm going to put a little mark there so that I know the size of my paper. And what I'm actually going to do, where I've got my little mark here to show me how long my piece of paper needs to be, I'm actually going to cut it a bit bigger than that, because I'm going to tuck it over the bottom and over the top. So I'll cut that out now, and then I'll show you what I'm going to do next. So if I hold this up for you, you'll be able to see, look, that I've actually cut that a little bit longer than the toilet roll, because what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little bit of glue on the end here, and stick that onto the toilet roll. Then I'm going to roll this up, and I'm going to put another strip of glue at the other end. So that sticks down, and then I'm going to make it nice and neat, I'm going to fold this over, and I'm going to use this as the top, so I'm not going to worry too much that it looks a little bit messy in there. But at the bottom here, I'm going to try and put some glue around the inside of the paper, so that when I tuck that over, I'm hoping that will stick to the inside of my toilet roll and look a little bit neater. There we are. There we are. So that's a bit neater at the bottom, but at the top here, this is where we're going to put the sort of the ball bit for the microphone. So that doesn't matter quite so much. So for that ball bit, what we want to do is we need to make a ball of paper. So I've just got some sort of packing paper here, and I'm going to screw that up quite tight roughly into a ball shape. I'm going to squeeze that in as tightly as I can. And then I think that's quite a good size for that. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get my piece of foil and I'm going to cover. Now this is probably a bit big for this ball and we don't want loads of extra. So I'm just going to tear a little bit off. And tear a bit off that side. And then a bit off that side. And I'm going to cover this as neatly as I can. And as tightly as I can into the foil. There we are. And I'm just going to squeeze, just fold that over at the bottom there. And then hopefully, there we are, that will sit on there and look a bit like a microphone. We need to fix this on here. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to use a bit of sellotape for that, I think. And I'm just going to use 3 bits of sellotape that are about 2 centimetres long. And I'm going to put a little bit of it on the foil, but a little bit of it on the tube as well. Then I'm going to turn it round and do the next bit. So a little bit, again, a little bit on the foil and a little bit on the tube. And then I'm going to turn it round and do one more around this side, a little bit on the foil and a little bit on the tube. And then that's quite nice and secure. But because I want to decorate it and make it a little bit fancy, I've got a little bit of ribbon that I'm going to glue round the top there that I hope will help to secure that on there as well. So I'm just going to do that now and then I'll show you when I've finished. So there we are. So if you want to put any other decorations on here, now is the time to do that. You might even want to decorate the top bit if you want to as well. I'm going to leave mine plain. And then the final thing that I'm going to do is, using my bit of paper, I'm going to measure the length of the microphone, and this time I'm going to cut it a little bit shorter than the microphone itself. And I'm going to cut it. So hopefully you can see there, look, this is a little bit shorter than my microphone. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to write on here some of those verses from the beginning of that psalm. Let us sing for joy to the Lord. Let us shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. And what I'll do is I'll put those verses up at the end so that you can, if you need to copy them, you can. So there we are. Let us sing for joy to the Lord. Shout aloud to the rock of our salvation. And then I'm just going to put some glue on the back of there. And then I'm going to stick that round the bottom of my microphone there to remind us of this Psalm 95 we've been looking at, that reminds us of the great God that we love and that loves us, and that singing to him for joy and shouting aloud to him is how we should worship him when we realise what a great and wonderful God he is. So do enjoy having a go at one of these microphones if you'd like to.
If you were watching last week, you will remember that Rachel set us a memory challenge. We were starting to learn some verses from the Bible. Let me do the signs, the actions, and see if it helps you to remember. Maybe you joined in with me. Maybe you even remembered the words that go like this. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. Let's try that again together. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. Now we've got to learn a little bit more of that verse from the Bible today. So we're going to add this on. I will praise you as long as I live. So praise and glorify are similar words. They mean a similar thing. So when we praise God, we tell him how brilliant we think he is. We do that in lots of different ways. And life and live are similar words, aren't they? So we'll use that same action that we did for life, and we'll use that for live as well. So this is what we're learning today. I will praise you as long as I live. Let's do that again. I will praise you as long as I live. So all together, it should look and sound something like this. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live. It's quite a lot, isn't it? Let's do it once more together. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live. Brilliant. I'm going to put a couple of slides up on the screen now with some words that you need, but some words that are missing to help you practice that a little bit more. On this slide, I've missed out the words that we've been using the signs for. So see if you can say the whole thing and fill in the gaps. On this slide, I've only included the words that we've been using signs for, and you've got to fill in all of the other gaps. See how you get on. Let's practice once more all together. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live. Well done. Now keep practicing because Rachel is going to teach us even more of it next week. So see if you can remember that ready for next week and be ready to learn the next bit too. Oh, that's all we've got time for today. It's been really great to be with you again. Thank you for joining me. And next week, Rachel will be back with you to see what our next mystery psalm is going to be. Until then, bye-bye.